The digital display on Rajiv Patel's watch read 4:15 a.m. when his life changed forever. The night security guard at the Al Zahir Palace had been making his final rounds through the staff quarters in Dubai's exclusive Al Barari district when something made him pause outside room 12B. A soft, rhythmic creaking sound. The door wasn't fully closed. He called out once, protocol demanding he announce himself before entering a female staff member's quarters. No response. The image that greeted him would haunt his dreams for years to come. Annika Fernandez, the 26-year-old kitchen supervisor, hanging from the decorative ceiling fixture, her body gently swaying in the artificial chill of the air conditioning. Rajiv's training kicked in. He radioed for backup while checking for a pulse he already knew wouldn't be there. Her skin was cool to the touch. She had been dead for hours. Possible suicide in staff quarters. Room 12B. Female. Send medical team immediately. He reported, voice steady despite the thundering of his heart. Only after ending the transmission did he notice the details that didn't align with a typical suicide scene. The overturned chair was several feet from where it should have been if she'd stepped off it. The room showed signs of a struggle. A broken lamp, papers scattered across the floor. Most concerning were the bruises visible on Annika's wrists and neck, inconsistent with self-inflicted injury. Within minutes, the staff quarters transformed from a quiet residential wing to a flurry of activity. The palace's head of security arrived, took one look at the scene, and made a call that bypassed standard procedure. Not to emergency services, but to a private number reserved for sensitive situations involving the Al Zahir family. This requires special handling, he said to Rajiv, gesturing for him to step outside. You found her at 4:15, understood? Nothing before that. You saw nothing unusual, heard nothing unusual. The investigation will be handled appropriately. But even the wealth and influence of the Al Zahir family couldn't fully contain what was quickly becoming an undeniable homicide. By sunrise, Detective Samira Khoury of Dubai Police's Special Investigations Unit arrived, her reputation for handling delicate cases involving elite households preceding her. At 38, Samira had spent 15 years navigating the complex intersection of wealth, power, and vulnerability that defined crimes within Dubai's most privileged circles. No one touches anything else, she announced, scanning the room with practiced precision. This is now a crime scene. The palace staff exchanged nervous glances. Someone was already making calls to the family's attorneys. To understand how Annika Fernandez ended up hanging from a ceiling fixture in one of Dubai's most prestigious residences, we must go back to where her story began, in the crowded streets of Quezon City, Philippines, where dreams often exceeded opportunities. Annika was the eldest of 6 children born to Eduardo and Maria Fernandez. Her father worked as a maintenance technician at a local hospital, while her mother ran a small food stall selling homemade Filipino dishes to workers and students. From an early age, Annika showed exceptional talent in the kitchen, learning her mother's recipes and developing her own variations that customers soon requested by name. She had a gift, Maria would later tell investigators through tears. Everyone said she should open her own restaurant someday. That dream had seemed possible when Annika secured a scholarship to Manila's prestigious Culinary Institute in 2018. For 3 semesters, she thrived, her instructors marking her as a student with professional potential. Then Eduardo was diagnosed with chronic kidney disease requiring expensive dialysis and eventually a transplant. The family's limited savings evaporated within months. Annika's decision to leave school was immediate and unquestioned. As the eldest, responsibility fell to her shoulders naturally. Family first, always, she told her tearful mother when she announced she was applying for overseas work. The Gulf Opportunity Staffing Agency promised positions in Dubai with salaries 5 times what Annika could earn in Manila. The contracts required a 2-year commitment, but the agency representative emphasized the potential for career advancement and skill development in Dubai's booming hospitality industry. You'll be working in 5-star hotels and exclusive private residences, the recruiter promised. With your background, you'll rise quickly. What the recruiter didn't mention were the 16-hour days, the confiscated passports, or the vulnerable position foreign workers occupied in the hierarchical society of the United Arab Emirates. Annika arrived in Dubai in January 2021, one of 26 Filipino workers placed that month through the agency. Her initial position as an entry-level kitchen assistant at the Al Zahir Palace paid less than promised but still allowed her to send $400 home monthly, enough to cover her father's treatments and help with her siblings' school expenses. Her first months were marked by acute homesickness and cultural adjustment struggles. The intense heat, unfamiliar customs, and strict hierarchy within the household staff created a constant state of anxiety. In video calls home, she maintained a bright facade while privately crying herself to sleep most nights. The other kitchen staff barely speak English or Tagalog, she wrote in her journal, later recovered by Detective Corey. The food is so different. I'm afraid of making mistakes. They can send me home anytime, and we would lose everything. Despite these challenges, Annika established a routine. She worked from 5 a.m. until 9 p.m., primarily washing dishes and preparing basic ingredients. On her one day off each week, she attended Mass with other Filipino workers and sent money transfers to her family. Her mother saved every receipt, documenting Annika's unfailing support. The turning point came 6 months after her arrival when head chef Alejandro Vega noticed Annika's improvements to a traditional Emirati fish dish. While preparing staff meals, she had incorporated techniques from Filipino cuisine that enhanced the flavor profile without altering the dish's essential character. Who modified this recipe? Chef Vega demanded during staff meal. The kitchen fell silent, everyone assuming criticism would follow. Annika reluctantly raised her hand. I added a small amount of calamansi and adjusted the spice blend. I can remake it the original way, sir. Instead of reprimanding her, Vega requested she prepare the dish again, this time for the family's dinner. When Sheikh Naveed specifically complimented the meal, Annika's position in the kitchen hierarchy shifted overnight. Within weeks, she was promoted from dishwasher to prep cook. Her responsibilities expanded, her working conditions improved, and her salary increased by 30%. Every extra dirham went directly to her family in the Philippines. Annika's progression continued steadily over the next 18 months. Her innovative approaches to traditional dishes earned Chef Vega's respect, and her natural leadership abilities made her popular among the kitchen staff. When the previous kitchen staff supervisor left to open a restaurant in Abu Dhabi, Vega recommended Annika as his replacement, an unprecedented promotion for someone with her limited experience and foreign background. She has something special, Vega told the household manager. A perfect balance of creativity and discipline. The kitchen runs more efficiently with her organizing the staff. By November 2022, Annika was supervising 12 employees, developing weekly menu plans, and occasionally preparing specialty dishes requested by family members. Her salary had tripled since her arrival, allowing her father to undergo his desperately needed kidney transplant and her 3 youngest siblings to transfer to better schools. The video calls home now showed a confident young woman describing her achievements with quiet pride. The frightened girl who had arrived in Dubai had transformed into a poised professional with growing influence in one of the city's most prominent households. We are so proud of you, her mother told her during their Sunday calls. You sacrificed so much for us. What her family couldn't see was the complex world Annika navigated daily within the sprawling Al Zahir compound. The 40,000-square-foot residence was divided into 3 distinct wings: family, guests, and staff, connected by landscaped courtyards featuring traditional Islamic architecture with modern luxury elements. Fountains, date palms, and privacy walls created a self-contained paradise where wealth insulated the family from the outside world. Sheikh Naveed Al Zahir, 42, represented the new generation of Emirati business leaders. Harvard-educated with an MBA from INSEAD, he had successfully diversified his family's oil wealth into technology, real estate, and financial services. His impending appointment to the Emirates Investment Authority would solidify his position among Dubai's most influential power brokers. The announcement of his engagement to his cousin Layla from a neighboring Emirates ruling family had made headlines across the Gulf region. The marriage represented more than a personal union. It was a strategic alliance between families with significant political and economic interests throughout the Middle East. The wedding is scheduled for next summer, The household staff were informed during a special briefing. Preparations will require exceptional attention to detail and discretion. Any staff member unable to maintain our standards during this period will be immediately replaced. Within this rarefied atmosphere, staff dynamics operated according to strict hierarchies. The senior household manager, British-educated and connected to the family through decades of service, oversaw all operations. Department heads for security, maintenance, kitchen, and personal service reported directly to him, each supervising their specialized teams. Annika's position as kitchen staff supervisor placed her in an unusual middle ground. She was technically staff but had authority over others. She was foreign but occupied a position traditionally held by Arabs or Europeans. She was young but responsible for maintaining standards expected by one of Dubai's most demanding families. Remember your position, Yasmin Bakr, the household's personal service director, cautioned her early in her promotion. Authority here is given conditionally and can be withdrawn just as quickly, especially for people like us. The warning was unnecessary. Annika understood precisely how precarious her position was and how much her family depended on her continued employment. She maintained a professional distance from those she supervised while showing appropriate deference to her superiors. What she couldn't have anticipated was how her carefully managed existence would be upended by a late-night request from Sheikh Naveed himself. A simple desire for a specific dish that would set in motion a chain of events leading to her death 7 months later. As Detective Corey surveyed the room where Annika's life had ended, she noted the personal touches that humanized the standard staff quarters. Family photographs arranged on a small shelf, a prayer card beside the bed, a half-finished letter to her youngest sister describing plans to visit home for Christmas. These weren't the surroundings of someone contemplating suicide. These were the possessions of a woman building a future. I want complete access to the security footage, staff interviews without supervision, and her personal communications, Corey informed the increasingly nervous palace security chief. This woman didn't kill herself, and I intend to find out exactly who was responsible. What Corey couldn't yet know was how deep the conspiracy extended, or how powerful the interests were that would align against her investigation. The truth about Annika Fernandez's death would challenge everything she thought she understood about justice in the gilded world of Dubai's elite. If you've made it this far in our story, you're about to witness how quickly power can corrupt and how easily vulnerability can be exploited. Make sure you're subscribed to our channel because Annika's journey from trusted employee to disposable inconvenience reveals the darkest aspects of privilege and desperation. The first private encounter between Annika Fernandez and Sheikh Naveed Al-Zahir happened on a Tuesday in April 2022. It was nearly midnight when the request came down to the kitchen staff quarters. The Sheikh had just concluded an international call with business partners in Singapore and requested a light meal. Normally, such late-night requests were handled by the night kitchen staff, but they were short-handed that evening. As kitchen supervisor, Annika took responsibility rather than waking another staff member. I can prepare something quickly, she told the household manager who had relayed the request. What would the Sheikh prefer? He mentioned something about a dish he had in Manila last year, something with fish and lime. He said you might know it. Annika immediately thought of sinigang, the sour Filipino soup she had grown up eating. The palace kitchen was stocked with ingredients from around the world, allowing her to prepare a reasonably authentic version, despite being thousands of miles from home. She worked efficiently, the kitchen quiet except for the soft sounds of her knife against the cutting board. There was something calming about working alone, away from the usual chaos of meal preparation for the household's 27 family members and staff. By the time she arranged the steaming dish on a silver tray alongside freshly baked pan de sal, her initial nervousness had transformed into professional pride. The Sheikh's private dining room was adjacent to his office in the family wing, an area where kitchen staff rarely ventured. A uniformed attendant opened the door for her, then disappeared, leaving Annika to place the meal on the elaborately carved table herself. That smells exactly like what I remember, Sheikh Naveed said, looking up from his laptop. In person, he was more approachable than his public persona suggested. At 42, his trim beard was immaculately groomed, and his casual linen shirt conveyed relaxed confidence rather than the formal ceremonial attire he wore for official functions. "Sinigang, sir," Annika explained, arranging the dish as she'd been taught. "Traditional Filipino sour soup. I added extra tamarind since you mentioned enjoying acidic flavors to Chef Vega previously." She expected him to dismiss her immediately. Instead, he closed his laptop and gestured to the dish. "You've made this authentically? Not adapted for Arabic tastes. As authentically as possible with available ingredients, sir." She remained standing with her hands clasped behind her back, as protocol required. "I've been trying to find this exact flavor since my trip to Manila." He took a spoonful, closing his eyes briefly as he tasted it. "Perfect. This brings back memories of that entire visit." What should have been a brief service interaction expanded into an unexpected conversation. Sheikh Naveed asked about regional variations of the dish, about Annika's culinary training, about how Filipino cuisine had been influenced by its colonial history. Each question revealed a genuine curiosity that caught her off guard. Security camera footage later reviewed by Detective Curry would show this first encounter lasting 27 minutes. Far longer than typical interaction between the Sheikh and household staff. More telling was the body language. Annika gradually relaxing from her formal posture, Sheikh Naveed leaning forward with engaged interest, both gesturing animatedly when discussing cooking techniques. "You have a gift," he told her as she collected the empty dishes. "Your understanding of flavor balance is exceptional." "Thank you, sir. I was fortunate to have good teachers." "Would you be willing to prepare other Filipino dishes? I've been interested in expanding my culinary knowledge." "Of course, sir. Anytime." The request seemed innocent enough, a wealthy employer with sophisticated tastes seeking culinary variety. But as Annika returned to the staff quarters that night, she felt a subtle shift in her position within the household. She had been noticed not just as a functional staff member, but as someone with valuable knowledge and skill. What began as an occasional late-night request soon established itself as routine. Twice weekly, usually after international business calls that ran late into the evening, Sheikh Naveed would request Annika specifically to prepare dishes from her homeland or other Southeast Asian cuisines she had studied. These sessions moved from the formal dining room to the palace's secondary kitchen, a smaller, more intimate space originally designed for family members who occasionally enjoyed cooking themselves. Here, Sheikh Naveed would watch Annika work, asking questions about techniques and ingredients while sharing stories about his business travels. "You're not just cooking," he observed during one such session in June. "You're creating experiences, memories. That's what separates a true culinary artist from someone who simply follows recipes." The compliment warmed her more than it should have. Professional boundaries remained clearly defined. He was still Sheikh Al-Zahir, employer and member of Dubai's ruling class. While she remained staff, a foreign worker dependent on his family's continued approval. But in the small kitchen, surrounded by the aromas of lemongrass and coconut milk, those boundaries felt less rigid. Yasmin Bakr, the sharp-eyed director of personal services, was the first to notice the changing dynamic. She cornered Annika in the staff corridor after observing her third private cooking session with Sheikh Naveed. "Be careful with these special arrangements," she warned, her voice low despite the empty hallway. "You are not the first girl he has taken an interest in. Remember your place." The warning contained layers of meaning that Annika understood immediately. Stories circulated among staff about previous young women who had caught the Sheikh's attention, though always carefully whispered and never with specific details. Such relationships, if they existed, remained invisible, ghosts that appeared briefly before vanishing without explanation. "It's just cooking lessons," Annika assured Yasmin. "Professional interest only." Yasmin's skeptical expression made it clear she didn't believe this. "Professional interest doesn't happen at midnight behind closed doors. I've worked for this family for 14 years. I've seen how these situations develop and how they end. Don't mistake attention for respect." Despite this warning, the private sessions continued through the summer and into fall. The cooking lessons expanded to include Annika introducing Sheikh Naveed to the street foods of Manila, the complex spice blends of Malaysian cuisine, and the delicate balance of Thai dishes. Each session stretched longer, the conversations extending far beyond culinary topics. Sheikh Naveed shared his frustrations about family expectations and business pressures. As the oldest son, he carried the weight of expanding the Al Zahir holdings beyond traditional sectors. His Harvard education had given him global ambitions that sometimes clashed with his father's more conservative approach. "They want innovation but fear change," he confided one night while they prepared a traditional Malay rundong. "I've spent years building relationships with technology investors in Singapore and financial institutions in London, but my father still measures success by how many oil contracts we secure." In turn, Annika gradually revealed pieces of her own story: her interrupted education, her father's health struggles, her dreams of eventually opening a fusion restaurant that would blend Filipino traditions with Middle Eastern flavors. "My youngest sister wants to be a doctor," she told him while demonstrating how to properly crush garlic for adobo. "Every extra dirham I send home gets saved for her university fund. She's brilliant, gets perfect marks in science without even trying." "You're making remarkable sacrifices for your family," Sheikh Naveed observed, his voice softening. "That kind of dedication deserves respect." It was during these conversations that the nature of their relationship began its subtle transformation. Security footage later analyzed by Detective Curry captured the progression. Sheikh Naveed standing closer than necessary while Annika demonstrated cutting techniques, their hands occasionally brushing when passing ingredients, lingering eye contact during conversations, gentle corrections of technique that required physical contact. By September, the cooking sessions had become the highlight of Annika's week. She found herself planning special dishes days in advance, researching ingredients that might surprise and impress. Her journal entries, later discovered by investigators, revealed her growing emotional investment despite her rational understanding of the situation's impossibility. "I know it's foolish," she wrote on September 23rd. "He lives in a world I can only serve, never join. But when he listens to me speak about Filipino cooking traditions, I feel truly seen for the first time since arriving here. Not as staff, not as a foreign worker, just as Annika." The turning point came during a weekend when most of the Al Zahir family was attending a royal wedding in Abu Dhabi. Sheikh Naveed had remained behind, citing business obligations. The palace operated with minimal staff, creating an unusual sense of informality among those who remained. That evening's cooking session focused on a traditional Filipino dessert, bibingka, a rice cake cooked with coconut milk and served with salted egg. The secondary kitchen was warm from the oven, filled with the sweet aroma of caramelizing sugar and coconut. In the Philippines, this is traditionally cooked in clay pots lined with banana leaves, Annika explained as she prepared the batter. "The leaves give it a subtle flavor that's impossible to replicate with modern methods." "You miss home," Sheikh Naveed observed, noticing the wistfulness in her voice. "Sometimes, especially during festivals and holidays." She poured the batter into the pan, her movements precise despite her awareness of his closeness. "But I found unexpected happiness here too." The security camera in the corner of the kitchen captured what happened. Sheikh Naveed moving behind her, ostensibly to observe her technique, his hand covering hers as she stirred the mixture. "I've come to look forward to these evenings more than any other part of my week," he said, his voice low enough that the security microphones barely registered it. Annika remained still, her pulse visibly quickening at her throat. "I have too." The footage showed them turning toward each other simultaneously, the wooden spoon forgotten in the mixture. What began as a hesitant, questioning kiss quickly deepened into something more urgent, more revealing of suppressed feelings. Detective Curry would later note in her case file that the security footage from the remainder of that evening had been mysteriously corrupted. A 17-minute gap that coincided precisely with the time Sheikh Naveed and Annika left the kitchen together, heading toward the family wing's private quarters. What the missing footage couldn't conceal was the fundamental shift in their relationship. Over the following weeks, their cooking sessions became a carefully maintained cover for a relationship that violated every cultural taboo and social restriction of Emirati society. A relationship that, if discovered, would threaten not just Sheikh Naveed's standing but Annika's very safety in a country where unmarried intimate relationships remained criminalized. They developed elaborate precautions, communication through a private messaging application installed on a phone Sheikh Naveed gave her, careful timing of their meetings to avoid scrutiny, plausible professional explanations for their continued private sessions. To the outside observer, Annika remained the talented kitchen supervisor providing culinary expertise to an employer with sophisticated tastes. Only in private moments did they acknowledge the reality of their connection. "This is impossible," Annika whispered one night in late October as they sat in the garden pavilion overlooking the Gulf, one of the few places on the grounds not monitored by security cameras. "We're from different worlds. This can only end badly." "Nothing is impossible with enough planning and discretion," Sheikh Naveed assured her, his fingers intertwined with hers. "I've navigated more complex situations than this." "Have you? With other staff?" The question had been building within her for weeks, Yasmin's warning echoing in her mind. His hesitation told her everything. "This is different," he finally said. "What I feel for you is different." Despite her doubts, despite knowing better, Annika allowed herself to believe him. The intensity of their connection made the outside world, with all its hierarchies and restrictions, seem distant and less relevant. In stolen moments between her supervisory duties and his business obligations, they created a private reality where their differences in status and background temporarily disappeared. On November 11, 2023, Annika missed her monthly cycle. She dismissed it initially as stress-related. Her responsibilities had increased as the household prepared for an important diplomatic reception. But when morning sickness began the following week, she could no longer deny the possibility. The pharmacy-bought pregnancy test, purchased during her rare day off and taken in the privacy of a shopping mall restroom, confirmed what she already feared. The two pink lines appeared almost immediately, their clarity leaving no room for doubt or hope of misinterpretation. She sat in the stall for nearly an hour, mind racing through increasingly desperate scenarios. Return to the Philippines immediately? Impossible without breaking her contract and losing the income her family depended on. Seek medical intervention privately? Risky and potentially illegal. Tell Sheikh Naveed? The most frightening option of all, with the most unpredictable outcome. That evening, she requested a private meeting through their secure messaging channel. He responded immediately, suggesting their usual cooking session as cover. Her hands trembled as she prepared ingredients she could barely focus on, her practiced movements now mechanical and distracted. "You seem distant tonight," Sheikh Naveed observed as she methodically chopped vegetables without her usual commentary on technique or flavor. "I need to tell you something." Her voice was barely audible over the sound of the knife against the cutting board. "Something that will change everything." Before she could continue, the kitchen door opened unexpectedly. Yasmin Bakr entered with uncharacteristic excitement, addressing Sheikh Naveed directly without acknowledging Annika's presence. "Forgive the interruption, sir, but your father requested you call him immediately. The engagement agreement with Sheikh Al Nasser has been finalized. The announcement is scheduled for next week's gala." The timing couldn't have been more devastating. Annika kept her eyes fixed on the cutting board, the knife suddenly still in her hand as the implications became clear. An engagement, a politically strategic marriage that had likely been in negotiation for months, even as Sheikh Naveed had been deepening his relationship with her. "Thank you, Yasmin. Tell him I'll call within the hour," Sheikh Naveed replied, his composed voice revealing nothing of the tension that had instantly filled the room. After Yasmin left, silence stretched between them. When Annika finally looked up, she found Sheikh Naveed watching her with an expression that combined apology with calculation, an assessment of how this new complication would affect their arrangement. "You're getting married," she stated flatly. "It's a family matter, a business alliance more than a marriage." He reached for her hand across the counter. "It doesn't change anything between us." She pulled away, the knife clattering against the cutting board. "I'm pregnant." The two words hung in the air between them, altering everything. His expression shifted from shock to something more complex, concern mixed with what looked disturbingly like strategic assessment. Not the reaction of a lover but of a businessman facing an unexpected complication. "This situation," he finally said, choosing his words with careful precision, "requires careful management. The coldness of the phrase struck Annika more painfully than anger would have. In that moment, she understood with perfect clarity what she had been to him all along. Not a partner worthy of love, but a problem requiring management. The following day, Annika was informed she was being reassigned from regular kitchen duties to special projects that would require less physical strain. Her workspace was relocated to a private kitchen area separate from the main staff facilities. The official explanation cited her exceptional performance and the need for specialized menu development for upcoming diplomatic events. The real purpose was isolation, separation from other staff who might notice her condition as it progressed, controlling who had access to her, and managing the potential scandal before it could emerge. She had become a liability to be contained rather than a person to be protected. As Detective Curry would later piece together from security records and staff interviews, this marked the beginning of Annika's transition from valued employee to inconvenient secret, a transformation that would ultimately lead to her body being discovered hanging from a ceiling fixture on that fateful morning in April. If you're finding Annika's story as compelling as thousands of others have, make sure you subscribe to our channel for the next installment. His personnel file, accessed during Detective Curry's investigation, revealed a complex history that made him the perfect candidate for this deception. Divorced 4 years earlier, he had no family entanglements in Dubai. More significantly, financial records showed mounting debts to several underground gambling operations, illegal establishments catering to expatriates seeking diversions prohibited under strict UAE law. I understand you have financial considerations that make this arrangement beneficial, Annika said carefully, searching for language that wouldn't humiliate either of them. Maroon's jaw tightened momentarily before he nodded. We all have our reasons for the choices we make. His eyes briefly met hers. I imagine you didn't plan to be in this position either. It was the first moment of genuine human connection in what had otherwise been a coldly transactional process. In that brief exchange, they recognized their shared powerlessness within a system that used their respective vulnerabilities, her pregnancy and his debts, as leverage to secure compliance. Over the next week, the arrangement took shape with disturbing efficiency. Paperwork was prepared, living arrangements reorganized, and a narrative constructed to explain their sudden relationship to the household staff. Annika was provided with a script to follow when informing her family in the Philippines. A story about meeting Maroon months earlier, developing feelings, and deciding to marry quickly due to her unexpected pregnancy. The financial transfers to your family will increase by 60% starting next month, Tarek informed her during one of their preparation meetings. This will support your narrative about improved circumstances through marriage. Your mother has already been informed you're dating someone special. The realization that they had been monitoring her communications with her family sent a chill through Annika. How many of her private conversations had been surveilled? How long had they been preparing contingencies for possible complications in her relationship with Sheikh Naveed? The marriage ceremony took place on December 29, 2023, at Sheikh Naveed's secondary residence, a smaller but still luxurious property in Dubai's Al Burshah district. The setting was deliberately chosen for its privacy and separation from the main palace where most staff were familiar with both Annika and Maroon. The ceremony itself was brief, conducted by an imam who appeared to have no knowledge of the circumstances. Tariq Al-Faisai and Yasmin Bakr served as the only witnesses, their presence ensuring both legal compliance and continued monitoring of the arrangement. Annika wore a simple white dress purchased by Yasmin rather than traditional Filipino wedding attire. Maroon's dark suit appeared new but ill-fitting across his shoulders. Neither of them wore expression appropriate for a wedding day, no joy, no nervous anticipation, not even the calm satisfaction of a considered decision. Security footage would later show two people going through motions with the mechanical compliance of employees completing an assigned task. The documentation will be processed through expedited channels, Tariq explained after the imam departed. Within days, you'll have official marriage certificates to present as needed. It was only later that evening, as Annika reviewed the paperwork in her new private staff apartment, that confusion began to creep in. Certain phrases in the Arabic sections didn't align with the English translation she could understand. When she attempted to ask Maroon about these discrepancies during their awkward dinner, their first meal together as nominal husband and wife, he brushed aside her concerns. Legal documents always have technical language, he said dismissively. Tariq handles all the Sheikh's legal matters. If he processed it, it's correct. Their living arrangement embodied the contradictory nature of their situation. On paper, they were husband and wife sharing the private staff apartment formerly allocated to a departed senior household manager. In reality, Maroon maintained separate sleeping quarters, using the arrangement primarily as a convenient address rather than an actual residence. More disturbing was the continued expectation of Annika's availability to Sheikh Naveed. Despite her now officially married status, the private cooking lessons resumed within days of the ceremony, though now they were scheduled during Maroon's driving duties for other family members, ensuring his absence. "Nothing has changed between us," Sheikh Naveed told her during their first private encounter after the marriage, reaching for her with the familiar intimacy they had established months earlier. "This arrangement simply provides necessary structure." But everything had changed. The trust that had developed between them had been irreparably damaged by the clinical way he had addressed her pregnancy. The warmth she had mistaken for genuine affection had been replaced by a transactional approach that revealed the true nature of their relationship. She submitted to his advances that evening and in subsequent meetings, her compliance driven by the complex mixture of lingering emotional attachment, financial dependency, and growing fear of what might happen if she rejected the script that had been written for her. Maroon, meanwhile, displayed increasing resentment about the arrangement despite, or perhaps because of, the substantial financial compensation. Their rare conversations in the apartment revealed a man struggling with his role in the deception. "I thought the money would make it easier," he confided during one late evening when he had returned from the gambling establishments that still drew him despite his official financial rehabilitation. "But every day, I feel less like myself. I drive the Sheikh to his meetings, knowing what happens when he returns. I cash checks for a marriage that exists only on paper." Annika's pregnancy advanced with each passing week, her condition becoming increasingly difficult to conceal from the general household staff. Her work schedule was reduced and restructured around a special assignment, developing menu plans for the Sheikh's upcoming diplomatic functions, an arrangement that minimized her visibility while maintaining the fiction of continued employment. Her public appearances were carefully managed, with Yasmin Bakr orchestrating her movements throughout the palace to avoid scrutiny. The loose-fitting uniform specially modified by the household tailor helped conceal her changing body, but by February 2024, the physical evidence of her pregnancy had become impossible to completely hide. "Remember your cover story," Yasmin reminded her before rare interactions with other staff members. "You and Maroon met months ago. This pregnancy was unexpected but welcomed. You're both excited about building a family." The repeated rehearsal of this fiction wore on Annika's psychological well-being. Her once vibrant personality became subdued, her interactions with others carefully scripted to avoid any deviation from the approved narrative. Even her communications with her family in the Philippines were monitored, with Tariq occasionally suggesting topics for her weekly video calls. Those calls became her only real connection to her former life, though even these were contaminated by the necessity of perpetuating the deception. Her mother's joy at the news of her marriage and pregnancy added layers of guilt to Annika's already complicated emotional state. "You look tired, Annik," her mother observed. By early April 2024, Annika had settled into the routine of her carefully managed existence. Nearly 5 months pregnant, she moved through the Al-Zahir household like a ghost, present but barely noticed, her interactions limited to a small circle of individuals who were privy to the arrangement. Her primary responsibilities had been reduced to preparing specialized meals for Sheikh Naveed and occasionally planning menus for diplomatic events she would never attend. The discovery that would ultimately lead to her death happened on April 12th, during one of these routine meal deliveries. Sheikh Naveed was meeting with international investors, and Tariq Al-Faisai had requested that Annika personally deliver the lunch service to his office adjacent to the meeting room. Such requests had become common, a way of limiting her exposure to household staff while maintaining the pretense of valued employment. "Leave everything on the side table," Tariq instructed before stepping out to attend the ongoing meeting. "I'll serve it when there's a suitable break in discussions." Alone in his office, Annika arranged the dishes with professional precision. It was as she placed the final item, a traditional Emirati dessert, that she noticed the document folder left open on Tariq's desk. Under normal circumstances, she would have ignored it, professional boundaries having been thoroughly ingrained through her years of service. But a glimpse of her own name on the exposed page caught her attention. Security footage later examined by Detective Curry showed Annika hesitating for 17 seconds before approaching the desk, a moment of internal debate clearly visible in her body language. The camera angle obscured the documents themselves but captured her reaction as she examined the contents. Her hand moved instinctively to her abdomen in a protective gesture, her posture stiffening with visible tension. What Annika had discovered was her own marriage certificate, the document she had signed during the December ceremony, but with notations in Arabic that hadn't been explained to her. The official form contained markings in the margin indicating ceremonial registration only and no civil status change. Most disturbing was a notation referring to a separate agreement with specific provisions for contract termination post-delivery. She quickly photographed the documents with her phone before returning them to their original position, completing the food arrangement just as Tariq returned to the office. "Is everything satisfactory?" he asked, noting her slightly flustered appearance. "Yes, sir. Everything is arranged as requested." Her voice remained steady despite the turmoil beneath the surface. That evening, in the privacy of her apartment while Maroon was on driving duty, Annika began researching the legal implications of what she had discovered. Using the phone Sheikh Naveed had given her, ostensibly for coordinating their private meetings, she accessed websites explaining UAE marriage registration procedures. What she learned confirmed her worst fears. Without proper civil registration, her marriage to Maroon had no legal standing. The ceremony had been theater, creating an appearance of legitimacy without any actual legal protection for her or her unborn child. The timing of this discovery couldn't have been worse. International media had just published photos of Sheikh Naveed with his fiancée Layla at a pre-engagement celebration. The images showed them at a luxury resort in Abu Dhabi, surrounded by members of both families. The accompanying article detailed the political and financial implications of their upcoming marriage, how it would strengthen business ties between the two families and potentially position Sheikh Naveed for future leadership roles within the Emirates' governmental structure. The union represents a merging of two of the UAE's most influential families, the article stated. Sheikh Naveed Al Zahir's pending appointment to the Emirates Investment Authority is widely seen as preparation for eventual ministerial responsibilities, with his marriage to Layla Al Nasser creating valuable alliances within the region's political establishment. Each word drove home the reality of her situation. She was carrying the child of a man whose future had been mapped out along paths that excluded her entirely. A man who had orchestrated an elaborate deception to contain the potential scandal of her pregnancy. The final piece fell into place the following morning when she overheard a conversation between Tariq and Maroon in the courtyard beneath her apartment window. Their voices carried clearly in the early morning quiet, unaware of her presence above them. "The arrangements for after the birth are finalized," Tariq was saying, his voice carrying the same efficient tone he applied to all business matters. "She'll be moved to the property in Thailand once the doctor confirms travel is safe. The documentation for the child will be processed as discussed." "And my obligations end at that point?" Maroon asked. "The debt is considered cleared?" "Completely. Your gambling indiscretions will be expunged from all records, and the bonus payment will be transferred to your Beirut account. Your employment here continues unchanged." "And the girl? What happens to her after?" There was a pause before Tariq responded, his voice now lower though still audible. "That's not your concern. The Sheikh has been generous in his provisions. She'll have no financial complaints." The conversation continued as they moved across the courtyard, their voices fading beyond her ability to hear clearly. But Annika had understood enough. There was a plan for her and her child that extended beyond the birth, a plan that involved separation and containment, designed to eliminate any potential connection to Sheikh Naveed once the child was born. That evening, she confronted Maroon when he returned to the apartment. The security cameras installed in their living space captured the entire exchange, footage that would become critical to Detective Corey's investigation. "Our marriage isn't real," Annika stated without preamble as Maroon entered. It's not legally registered. I saw the documents in Tariq's office. Maroon's response wasn't surprise or denial but resignation. He sank onto the sofa, loosening his uniform tie with a weary gesture. You weren't supposed to know that yet. Yet? So you've known all along? That the ceremony was fake. The betrayal in her voice was palpable. Not fake. Ceremonial. There's a difference. He wouldn't meet her eyes. The imam was real. The ceremony was real. Just not officially recorded in government systems. So I have no legal status as your wife? My baby has no legal protection. Her voice rose slightly before she consciously controlled it, aware of the monitoring. You don't need legal protection. You have the Sheikh's word. Maroon finally looked at her. Do you know how many people would trade places with you? The financial package alone is more than most people see in a lifetime. And what exactly am I being paid for, Maroon? What happens after the baby is born? She moved closer, her hand protectively covering her abdomen. I heard you and Tariq this morning. The color drained from his face. You shouldn't eavesdrop on private conversations. And you shouldn't participate in human trafficking. The word hung in the air between them, its implications too severe to be casually dismissed. It's not like that. Maroon stood abruptly, pacing the small living area. No one is trafficking anyone. After the baby comes, you go back to Philippines with money. I keep working here with clean record. Everyone wins. And my child? What happens to my baby in this arrangement where everyone wins? Maroon's hesitation told her everything she needed to know. The child will be provided for. Generously. Provided for where? With whom? Annika pressed, stepping into his path to force eye contact. Tell me the truth, Maroon. What have you agreed to? The next words came reluctantly. The child stays here, under the protection of the Al-Zahir family. You receive visitation rights and continuing financial support conditional on discretion. The revelation struck Annika with physical force. She staggered backward, gripping the edge of the dining table for support. They're going to take my baby. Not take. Provide for. Maroon attempted to reframe the arrangement with the euphemisms that had been carefully constructed around it. The child will have advantages you could never offer. The best education, health care, opportunities. And a false identity, Annika interrupted, raised by strangers while I'm sent away with hush money. This is how things work in this world. Maroon's tone hardened, frustration replacing his earlier discomfort. People like us don't have the luxury of moral outrage. We take what's offered and consider ourselves fortunate. I need to speak with Sheikh Naveed. Annika moved toward the door, determination overriding caution. He needs to hear what I... Maroon caught her arm, his grip tightening painfully. That would be a serious mistake. People who create problems for the family disappear. Accept the money and be grateful. The threat was unmistakable, delivered with the certainty of someone who had witnessed the fate of others who had challenged the Al-Zahir family's arrangements. Annika pulled her arm free, maintaining eye contact with a defiance that visibly unsettled him. I am carrying his child, she said quietly. That gives me certain rights that money can't erase. Rights? Maroon laughed without humor. Look around you. We're in Dubai, not America. Your rights extend exactly as far as they want them to, no further. The conversation ended in uneasy standoff, but Annika's mind was already racing ahead, formulating a plan. If she had learned anything from her rise from dishwasher to kitchen supervisor, it was the value of methodical preparation. She would need evidence, leverage, and protection if she were to challenge the carefully constructed deception surrounding her pregnancy. Over the next week, she assembled her case with the same careful attention to detail she had once applied to complex meal preparations. Using the phone Sheikh Naveed had given her, now revealed as both gift and surveillance tool, she began documenting everything. First, she backed up the photos of the marriage certificate with its damning notations, storing them in a cloud account created under a false name. Next, she surreptitiously recorded conversations with Maroon, capturing his admissions about the arrangement and the additional payments he had received. Most critically, she downloaded information about workers' rights in the UAE and contact information for the Philippine Embassy's labor attaché. Her most risky move came on April 18th, when she managed to pass a message to Raj Kumar, the Indian delivery driver who supplied the kitchen with fresh produce 3 times weekly. Under the guise of checking an order, she slipped him a note with instructions to mail a sealed envelope to her cousin in Quezon City if she didn't personally hand him a specific cancellation code during his next delivery. "It's a surprise for my family," she explained when he looked confused. "Please, it's important." The envelope contained copies of all her evidence along with a detailed account of her situation, instructing her cousin to contact both Philippine authorities and international human rights organizations if activated. It was her insurance policy, a dead woman's switch designed to ensure that if anything happened to her, the truth would emerge. Security footage from April 22nd shows Annika in her apartment, meticulously organizing her documentation into a presentation folder. Her expressions shift between determination and fear as she rehearses what appears to be a prepared statement, occasionally glancing down at her growing abdomen as if seeking reassurance from the child within. On April 23rd, she requested a private meeting with Sheikh Naveed through their secure messaging channel. His response came hours later, a brief agreement to meet in the private kitchen that evening at 10 p.m. after his return from business meetings in Abu Dhabi. The security cameras in the kitchen captured the beginning of their final confrontation. Annika arrived early, arranging her documentation on the counter where they had once prepared meals together. She wore her formal staff uniform despite being off-duty, perhaps seeking the psychological armor of professionalism for what she knew would be a difficult conversation. Sheikh Naveed entered at precisely 10:15 p.m., his business attire suggesting he had come directly from his meetings. His initial smile faded quickly as he registered the tension in Annika's posture and the documents spread before her. "What's all this?" he asked, gesturing toward the papers. "Evidence," Annika replied, her voice steady despite her visible anxiety. "Of everything. The fake marriage, the plans for after the birth, all of it." The footage shows Sheikh Naveed's expression shifting from confusion to concern as Annika methodically presented her case, showing him the photographed marriage certificate with its revealing notations, playing a brief audio recording of Maroon discussing the post-birth arrangements, and finally placing before him a document she had prepared outlining her demands. "I don't want money," she stated clearly, tapping the paper between them. "I want legal recognition for our child. I want protection under law, not promises that can be broken when convenient." Sheikh Naveed's initial response was conciliatory, his hands spread in a calming gesture. "Annika, there's no need for this approach. If you were unhappy with the arrangements, you should have come to me directly. We can discuss adjustments that would make you more comfortable." Comfortable. The word seemed to trigger something in her. "I'm not a business problem to be managed. This is our child." She placed both hands on her abdomen, emphasizing the reality he had been carefully avoiding in their discussions. The security footage shows their conversation growing increasingly heated over the next 20 minutes. Sheikh Naveed alternated between placating promises and thinly veiled reminders of her vulnerable position. Annika remained focused on her core demand, legal acknowledgement of paternity and guaranteed rights for her child. At 11:03 p.m., the kitchen door opened to admit Tariq and Maroon, both appearing to have been summoned by a text message Sheikh Naveed had sent during a moment when Annika was reorganizing her documents. The dynamic in the room visibly shifted with their arrival, power balances realigning as Annika found herself confronting not just Sheikh Naveed, but the entire apparatus of containment that had been constructed around her pregnancy. The ensuing four-way conversation became increasingly tense, with Tariq attempting to redirect the discussion toward practical considerations while Maroon remained largely silent, his presence serving primarily as physical intimidation. At one point, Annika directly accused them of conspiring to separate her from her child after birth, a charge Tariq deflected with practiced diplomatic skill. At 11:24 p.m., after a particularly heated exchange during which Annika threatened to contact both the Philippine Embassy and international media, Sheikh Naveed appeared to reach a decision. He spoke briefly in Arabic to Tariq and Maroon, words not captured by the security system's audio recording, but later described by a palace staff member with knowledge of Arabic as instructions to handle the situation definitively and ensure complete resolution. With these instructions delivered, Sheikh Naveed departed the kitchen, leaving Annika alone with Tariq and Maroon. The final security footage shows Maroon remaining with Annika in the kitchen at 11:42 p.m., while Tariq exits after a brief, inaudible exchange with the driver. What happened in the next 2.5 hours remains the central mystery of Detective Curry's investigation. The security footage from 11:42 p.m. until 4:15 a.m. when Rajiv Patel discovered Annika's body was deleted from the palace security system. A 17-minute gap that expanded to encompass the critical period during which Annika Fernandez transitioned from threatening witness to silent corpse. The carefully constructed facade had been maintained until Annika uncovered its hollow center. Her discovery set in motion the final confrontation that would transform her from inconvenient secret to permanent liability, a transformation that could only end with her elimination. The call to Dubai Police Emergency Dispatch came at 4:15 a.m. on April 24, 2024, a carefully worded report of an apparent suicide in the staff quarters of the Al Zahir Palace. The timing of the notification would later become significant in Detective Samira Curry's investigation. Security footage confirmed Rajiv Patel's discovery of the body at 4:15, yet the emergency call wasn't placed until 4:47. An unexplained 32-minute gap that suggested deliberation rather than immediate response to a tragic discovery. Detective Curry arrived at 5:23 a.m., having been specifically requested by the precinct commander, who recognized the potential complexity of a death at one of Dubai's most influential households. At 38, Curry had established herself as the department specialist in cases involving foreign workers in elite residences, a niche expertise that had earned her both professional respect and powerful enemies within Dubai's stratified society. Born to a Lebanese father and an Egyptian mother, Curry had navigated the complex cultural landscape of the UAE with an outsider's perspective that proved invaluable in her police work. 15 years with Dubai Police, 12 of them in special investigations, had given her an intimate understanding of how wealth and influence operated within the seemingly rigid structures of Emirati law. The scene that greeted her contradicted the suicide narrative before she even examined the body. The overturned furniture, a toppled side table, a chair lying on its side 6 feet from where Annika had been found hanging, suggested a struggle rather than the deliberate actions of someone ending their own life. More telling were the defensive bruises visible on Annika's forearms and wrists, consistent with someone fending off attackers rather than self-harm. "This is a homicide scene," Curry stated flatly to the palace security chief, who had been maintaining a careful perimeter around the room. "I'm sealing this entire wing for forensic processing." The man's expression tightened. "With respect, Detective, the family would prefer discretion until the facts are established. A suicide is tragic but private. A murder investigation would create unnecessary complications." "Murder creates its own complications," Curry replied, gesturing for her forensic team to begin their work. "Containing evidence just adds obstruction of justice to the list." Her initial survey of the room revealed another anomaly. Annika's phone positioned on her bed, screen up, with what appeared to be a recording application open but paused. The positioning seemed deliberate, almost staged, as if someone had placed it there after stopping whatever recording had been in progress. By 6:30 a.m., the Al Zahir Palace had transformed from secluded estate to active crime scene. Forensic technicians methodically processed every surface of Annika's quarters, while uniformed officers secured potential escape routes and established a log of everyone who had accessed the staff wing in the previous 12 hours. The palace security chief, Farid Massoud, provided the first official timeline, a carefully constructed narrative that immediately raised Detective Curry's suspicions with its convenient gaps and passive construction. The deceased was last seen by multiple staff members at approximately 9 p.m. when she retired to her quarters, Massoud reported, reading from notes that appeared too polished for an emergency response. She had mentioned feeling unwell earlier in the day and had been excused from her afternoon duties. No unusual activities or visitors were noted until the discovery at 4:15 a.m. "And the security footage for the staff wing?" Curry asked. Massoud's hesitation was brief but telling. "Unfortunately, There was a system malfunction between approximately 11:30 p.m. and 4 a.m. The technical team is investigating the cause. A convenient malfunction, Curry observed. I'll need to interview that technical team immediately. The conflict between the official narrative and physical evidence deepened when Maroon Hakim was interviewed at 7:15 a.m. identified as Annika's husband of 4 months. He presented a composed demeanor that struck investigators as inappropriately controlled for someone whose pregnant wife had just died violently. I last saw Annika at dinner around 7 p.m., he stated, making steady eye contact with Detective Curry across the interview room table. She mentioned a headache and went to lie down. I had driving duties until late, so I slept in the staff lounge rather than disturbing her. Driving duties for whom? Curry pressed. Sheikh Naveed had meetings in Abu Dhabi. I returned with him at approximately 11 p.m., then remained on standby for other family members until around 3 a.m. The timeline directly contradicted security footage Curry had already reviewed, which clearly showed Maroon in the kitchen with Annika at 11:42 p.m., well after he claimed to have last seen her. When confronted with this discrepancy, Maroon modified his statement without visible concern. Yes, I forgot. After returning with the Sheikh, I briefly saw Annika in the kitchen. She was preparing a late snack. Our interaction was brief. Brief enough to forget entirely in your first statement? Curry noted, marking the contradiction in her case notes. Interviews with kitchen staff revealed a pattern of isolation around Annika that had been developing for months. Chef Alejandro Vega, who had once championed her promotion to kitchen supervisor, described a systematic distancing that had begun in December. One day she was my right hand, handling all staff scheduling and menu development, he explained. The next day, I'm told she's been reassigned to special projects with no explanation. We barely saw her after that. When we did, she seemed different, subdued. Other staff members corroborated this account, describing Annika's transition from central kitchen figure to peripheral presence over a matter of weeks. Several noted her marriage to Maroon had seemed sudden and unexpected, given no previous indication of a relationship between them. They never seemed like a couple, observed one kitchen assistant. Even after the marriage, they rarely arrived together or acknowledged each other when in the same room. It was strange. By mid-morning, Tariq Al-Faisai had arrived at the police station with the family's attorneys, a team of 3 legal experts specializing in criminal defense, international law, and public relations respectively. He presented himself as the family's official representative, explaining that Sheikh Naveed was unavailable due to pressing diplomatic obligations that cannot be postponed. Tariq provided a document folder containing what appeared to be Annika's employment records, medical history, and marriage certificate. Each document was meticulously organized, with translations provided for any Arabic text, a level of preparation that seemed excessive for an unexpected death just hours earlier. The Al-Zahir family is deeply saddened by this tragedy, Tariq stated with practiced sincerity. We are committed to full cooperation with your investigation, while protecting the privacy and dignity of all concerned. The marriage certificate he presented appeared legitimate at first glance, properly stamped and signed by all parties. It was only when Curry's team compared it with the photographed version later recovered from Annika's phone that the discrepancies became apparent. The document Tariq provided lacked the marginal notations indicating ceremonial registration only and contained official registration numbers absent from the version Annika had discovered in his office. The most revealing interview came from an unexpected source. Raj Kumar, the kitchen delivery driver, initially denied any significant interaction with Annika beyond normal business transactions. Under persistent questioning, however, he eventually admitted to their arrangement regarding the sealed envelope. She gave me package 1 week ago, he confessed, his discomfort evident in his refusal to make eye contact. Said to mail to Philippines if she didn't give me cancel code during next delivery. Said it was surprise for family. And did you mail this package? Curry asked. Yes, yesterday. She didn't meet me for delivery as usual. Kitchen supervisor said she was sick. I waited until end of day, but no cancel code came. I mailed package as promised. This revelation accelerated the investigation timeline. Khoury immediately contacted the Philippine embassy to intercept the package before it left Dubai, recognizing it might contain critical evidence. The embassy's cooperation was secured through diplomatic channels, though not without resistance from higher authorities who questioned the necessity of involving foreign officials. The forensic evidence assembled over the next 48 hours systematically dismantled the suicide narrative. The autopsy, conducted by Dr. Fatima Nazari, Dubai's chief medical examiner, revealed death by asphyxiation but with crucial inconsistencies from typical hanging cases. The ligature marks are inconsistent with the ceiling fixture's height and the victim's stature, Dr. Nazari explained during her preliminary report. More significantly, there are finger-shaped bruises on the neck indicating manual strangulation preceding the hanging. This is unequivocally a homicide staged to appear as suicide. Additional findings strengthened this conclusion. Bruising patterns on Annika's arms and torso suggested restraint by multiple individuals, at least 2 based on hand size and positioning. Time of death was established between midnight and 2 a.m., contradicting the palace security timeline. The pregnancy was confirmed at approximately 20 weeks, with the fetus showing no developmental abnormalities. Toxicology results revealed another significant detail: mild sedatives in Annika's system, not enough to incapacitate her but sufficient to slow reactions and impair resistance. These were not prescription medications, and no containers were found in her quarters, suggesting they had been administered without her knowledge. DNA collection from Annika's quarters yielded multiple male profiles, including expected matches to Maroon Hakim but also unidentified contributors whose samples were not in any accessible database. Most significantly, fingerprint evidence directly contradicted the official version of events, with Tariq Al-Faisai's prints found on the interior doorframe of Annika's quarters, despite his statement that he had not entered the staff residential areas in months. We have a forensic picture of at least 3 individuals in that room during the estimated time of death, Detective Khoury summarized for her investigative team, none of whom have acknowledged being there, all of whom had motive to silence the victim. The digital evidence recovered by the department's cyber unit provided the most comprehensive challenge to the official narrative. Despite sophisticated attempts to wipe Annika's phone data, technicians recovered substantial material through cloud backups and forensic extraction techniques. The recovered files included photos of the original marriage certificate with its revealing notations, audio recordings of conversations with both Maroon and Tariq discussing the arrangement's temporary nature, and text messages to her family showing the evolution of her situation. Most damning was a draft email to the Philippine Embassy's labor attaché detailing the entire arrangement and expressing fear for her safety as her pregnancy advanced. I am being held in a situation that I now understand will end with my child being taken from me, the draft stated. I have been forced into a fraudulent marriage and isolated from support networks. I fear what will happen when I am no longer needed as the vessel for this child. The technical team also recovered deleted security footage from palace servers, revealing movements that directly contradicted the official timeline. Most significantly, they recovered fragments of footage showing Tariq and Maroon entering Annika's quarters at 12:37 a.m., during the period palace security had claimed was lost due to system malfunction. Financial records obtained through court orders exposed the economic infrastructure of the arrangement. Payments to Annika's family in the Philippines had increased by precisely 60% following her marriage to Maroon, exactly as Tariq had promised. Meanwhile, Maroon's gambling debts had been systematically cleared through anonymous payments to various creditors, followed by regular deposits to an offshore account in his name. By April 26, 48 hours after discovering Annika's body, Detective Khoury had assembled compelling evidence of conspiracy, fraud, and murder. The case file detailed a systematic operation to contain Annika's pregnancy through deception, followed by her elimination when she threatened to expose the arrangement. What she lacked was direct evidence linking Sheikh Naveed to either the pregnancy or the murder, a critical gap given his power and diplomatic immunity as a future appointee to the Emirates Investment Authority. His involvement was implied throughout the evidence but carefully insulated through intermediaries like Tariq and Maroon. He's protected by layers of deniability, Khoury explained to her precinct commander during their case review. Everyone acted in his interests while maintaining his distance from operational details. Classic organized crime structure applied to a family situation. The commander, a veteran of Dubai's police hierarchy who understood political realities as well as legal ones, was blunt in his assessment. You have enough for the driver and possibly the advisor. Pursuing the Sheikh directly would require evidence we are unlikely to obtain given the immunity protections being arranged through diplomatic channels. So justice stops at the hired help? Khoury's frustration was evident. Justice extends as far as evidence and political reality allow, he replied. Focus on what can be proven beyond intervention. Build a case that even their attorneys cannot dismantle. The investigation reached a critical turning point on April 27, when the package Annika had sent through Raj Kumar was intercepted at Dubai International Airport's postal facility. The sealed envelope contained duplicates of all the evidence recovered from her phone, along with a handwritten letter that provided the final piece of the puzzle. If you are reading this, Annika had written, I have been silenced for threatening to expose my relationship with Sheikh Naveed al-Zahir and the child I carry. The documents enclosed prove both the relationship and the elaborate deception created to hide it. I fear for my life as my pregnancy advances and the Sheikh's political appointment and engagement approach. I believe they plan to take my baby and eliminate me once I am no longer needed as its mother. The letter included details only Annika could have known. The specific dates and locations of her intimate encounters with Sheikh Naveed, private conversations that had not been recorded by security systems, and unique identifying information about birthmarks on his body that could be verified if necessary. For Detective Khoury, this posthumous testimony transformed a circumstantial case into something far more substantial. Though still lacking direct evidence of Sheikh Naveed's involvement in the murder itself, she now had concrete proof of the motive behind Annika's elimination. A pregnancy that threatened both his political appointment and his strategic marriage alliance. As she compiled her case file for presentation to the public prosecutor, Khoury was acutely aware of the formidable opposition already mobilizing against her investigation. The al-Zahir family had engaged not just legal counsel but political consultants, media specialists, and former intelligence operatives skilled in managing problematic situations. They're constructing an alternative narrative, her cyber unit chief reported after monitoring news and social media channels. A tragic love triangle between staff members, jealousy leading to confrontation, suicide resulting from emotional distress. They're already placing stories with sympathetic outlets. Khoury's response was methodical, focusing on building a case that could withstand both legal challenges and political pressure. Document everything. Triple verify all evidence chains. Create backups of every digital file on secure servers outside departmental systems. The investigation had entered its most dangerous phase, the period when evidence had been gathered but charges not yet filed, when those implicated still had time and resources to obstruct justice. For Detective Samira Khoury, the coming days would test not just her investigative skills but her ability to navigate the treacherous intersection of wealth, power, and law in Dubai's hierarchical society. As she reviewed the case file late into the night of April 27th, a quote from one of Annika's journal entries kept returning to her thoughts. In this world, truth is not what happened but what powerful people agree happened. I have no power except the truth itself. I hope it will be enough. Whether that truth would be enough to secure justice remained to be seen, as forces far beyond a single detective's control began aligning to contain the damage to one of Dubai's most powerful families. If you've been following Annika's story with the outrage it deserves, subscribe now for the final installment. We'll reveal how justice is negotiated rather than served when wealth and diplomatic immunity enter the equation. The resolution of Annika's case exposes the harsh reality that in some worlds, truth becomes a commodity to be bought, sold, or buried alongside its advocates. Detective Samira Khoury understood that breaking a conspiracy protected by one of Dubai's most powerful families required strategy, not just evidence. On April 28th, she focused on the weakest link, Maroon Hakim. In the interrogation room, Khoury methodically laid out the evidence. Photos of Maroon at underground gambling establishments, records of his miraculously cleared debts, and security footage showing him entering Annika's quarters at 12:37 a.m., hours after he claimed to have last seen her. The prosecutor is preparing murder charges, Khoury stated. First degree, premeditated, with special circumstances due to the victim's pregnancy. The UAE still employs capital punishment in such cases. The mention of execution shattered Maroon's composure. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he whispered. "It was supposed to be simple. She would have the baby, take the money, and leave. Except Annika didn't want money. She wanted her child. That wasn't the agreement." Frustration tinged his voice. Tariq panicked. The Sheikh's appointment, the engagement alliance, everything was at risk. Millions in business deals, political connections, family honor. All threatened by one kitchen worker who wouldn't accept reality. With Maroon's partial confession and recovered security footage, Curry established a timeline of Annika's final hours. 10:15 p.m. Annika enters the kitchen to meet Sheikh Naveed. 10:38 p.m. Footage shows their heated discussion. 11:03 p.m. Tariq and Maroon enter, changing the confrontation's dynamic. 11:24 p.m. Sheikh Naveed leaves after giving instructions in Arabic. 11:42 p.m. to 2:15 a.m. Critical missing footage period. 4:15 a.m. Rajiv Patel discovers Annika's body. When forensic analysis confirmed Tariq's fingerprints on the ligature used in Annika's death, his attorneys negotiated limited questioning. Even within these constraints, Curry extracted revelations of systematic exploitation. "This was not the first such situation you've managed for the Al-Zahir family, was it?" Curry asked. After consulting with his attorney, Tariq carefully responded, "There have been occasional personal complications involving household staff that required discreet resolution. Financial records revealed substantial payoffs to at least 3 former employees who had been quietly deported after medical leaves. Each case included ongoing payments to family members abroad, contingent on confidentiality agreements. The difference with Ms. Fernandez was her refusal to accept the arrangement once she understood its true nature. She was unexpectedly resistant," Tariq acknowledged. "Most people in her position recognize the generosity of the financial provisions and the practical realities of their situation." When presented with Annika's intercepted letter detailing her relationship with Sheikh Naveed and fears about her pregnancy, Tariq finally cracked. "She threatened exposure at the worst possible moment," he admitted. "The Sheikh's appointment and engagement would have been destroyed. The family alliance with the Al Nasser interests would have collapsed. Billions in joint ventures would have been jeopardized. We had no choice." On May 2nd, arrest warrants were issued for Maroon and Tariq, charging both with conspiracy, fraud, and murder. No charges were filed against Sheikh Naveed despite evidence of his paternity.